The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the kind of Joyful Friar, not so Joyful Friar. I already did this episode. I recorded it a couple of days ago, and it's lost. Something happened in the recording, and so don't you hate it when that happens? But anyway, I get to be with you a second time on the same topic, which is the second part of a trilogy that is from book 2. If you remember the story, it's called Bridget, Not Dead, Just Bouncy. I told the story in the previous episode that did get recorded and has been made available to you. So anyway, I'm doing the second part again. We call this part compassionate response. I had my assistant, my prayer partner, Lisa Zarita, was on the episode that failed to record correctly. So she's not available, and I have a deadline. So I have to do this one on my own. But I love the story of Bridget. So if you recall, Bridget was 11 years old when she died falling from a tree. She didn't exactly, she didn't turn loose of it or anything. The limb broke, and she fell in a way that caused her death. When she hit the ground, she said she was out of her body and was locked out. She couldn't get back in. That's the way she described it. Well, in her recall of what happened immediately after that in her consciousness, she said people came toward her, spirit people came to help her, but she was afraid. She explained that kids hear it all the time from adults. Anytime they climb on anything, there's an adult there to say, get down from there, you're going to hurt yourself. Well, she said this was a tree that children climbed all the time. It wasn't a daredevilish thing that she was doing. She was just doing what other kids did and that she had done before, climbing this climbing tree. I did that a lot in my childhood. Maybe you did. Um, and she said kids know that there's always the possibility that you can fall. But this time she did, and she died. So she thought immediately as she was realizing that she was out of her body uh, and dying, she thought, this is a very bad thing. And I've just done a very bad thing. And I might be blamed for doing a very bad thing. And probably the next thing that's going to happen, this will be an even worse thing. So she was frightened about what might happen next. And so she said, I ran to hide. Well, how do you do that when you've just died? How do you run and hide when you've just died? Well, before all this started happening in my life, I would have never had any idea that that could be a thing, but it is, at least in my experience. She explained that she ended up in a place with other people who had also died by falls. And in fact, if you go back into last week's episode, or better yet, the story in book 2, the dream itself was a kind of collage of different people falling. And when I woke up from it, I thought this must be one of those combined stories where the thing that links them is the similarity in the manner of how their death occurred. And in fact, that's what happened. So she ended up in a place with other people who had fallen, but who were not quite yet ready to deal with what comes next. She explained to us that after that there were people there who were kind to her, and she wasn't being punished. She was only being dealt with at the level at which she was able to receive what they were giving. And by the time that I and my prayer partners get involved, the people that we're helping who died in some sort of a trauma have already been helped by others to the point where the part that we play, they're ready for. We're the discharge staff that helps them move from where they are out the door to a less therapeutic plane in the afterlife, where they're now ready to enjoy what I think of are the joys of heaven, or at least the options and possibilities. But when you're afraid and you've just been through a trauma, you're just not ready for that, apparently, anyway. So that's where we are in this story. We're dealing in this episode with compassionate response to her. So I'm going to give a few principles that were evoked in me. One of them was I just felt sorry for a little 11-year-old that not only died in a sudden and tragic way, but who then was frightened afterwards. It makes perfect sense to me. But the compassion means to suffer when and suffer with. And one of the things that she explained to us that there was a place prepared for her when she ran and hid, and she wasn't isolated. Uh, she was with others who might have been kind of curled in upon themselves, but not utterly uh, alone. They were still guarded, cared for, tended to the degree that they were willing to receive anything. Maybe you've been in a circumstance with someone who's grieving or troubled or something, and you want to help them and you try to help them, but you have to be very delicate and careful about how you offer your help because it's not necessarily wanted. Have been there, haven't you? It takes some skill and some grace, and sometimes just patience, letting people be as they are, and then gently finding ways that you might be able to uh, shine a little bit of a light or something. Well, anyway, that's where she was. Um, she came to understand that even in this place with other people who had fallen, she was maybe a little more healed than others were. And even though she was only 11, and she said, I'm not the smartest one here. And she was surprised that she ended up being the spokesperson because she said, I didn't volunteer for this. And she said, I wasn't even one of those people that came into your dream and showed how they died. She said, other people did that, but we're together and they've asked me if I would speak up. And so she said, I'm only doing it because I was invited and asked. And if I'm doing it wrong, somebody else can take over. She had like no ego around it. Isn't this crazy? But I think it's crazy wonderful that God's creation has so many niche places where everybody gets what they need, and they're not forced to take it right now just because it's offered. She explained that one of the things that she was taught was that you could help people out by pairing them together. She said sometimes people will do for someone else what they won't do for themselves. So she gave an example. She said there are some people here who fell to their death who were adults and who are now separated from their children. There are others who are children here, like herself, who don't have any adults caring for them or maybe haven't been receptive to it. And she said sometimes you can pair them up and they'll do for someone else what they wouldn't have done for themselves on their own. Then she said somebody said to her, you know, falling isn't always tragic. And it's not always terrible. Sometimes it's fun. And they said somebody brought a trampoline where part of the fun of being on a trampoline is going high on it so you can fall. And then she thought of other examples of like what she called a bouncy house, those inflatable uh, things that you sometimes see at a children's birthday party, where children go into it and they bounce up and down and they fall and they they stumble around and laugh the whole time. She mentioned amusement parks, that sometimes the fun thing about going into rides on an amusement park is that they go high and fall, and people enjoy screaming while they're falling, and they're screaming and laughing. She said there are some of the adults here that that don't want to take part in anything like that, but they might help a child do it, and so that they can kind of help each other a little bit that way. And then she said somebody reminded me that we needed to pay attention to the kind of bodies that we have now. And she said, we don't have bones anymore that can break. We don't have blood that gushes out of a hole. When we fall now, we won't injure ourselves in a fatal way again. You can only do that once. So the way that she put it was what became the title of the chapter. We're not dead. We're just bouncy. When we fall now, we just bounce up again. So she began to have her own little ministry, if you want to call it that, of helping people kind of get over themselves or rethink. And I think that's just so important. Um, I've been a pastoral counselor in pastoral ministry for a long time. I'm in my 39th year of priesthood. And I was in psychotherapy twice in my 20s, and I was paying for it naturally, and I tried to be a good recipient of what I was being offered. And so I paid attention to what worked for me. And part of what I saw was that a good therapist could catch you in some illogic that was keeping you stuck or keeping you sad, and maybe challenging a chain of what you think is logical. This happened and then this happened and then this happened, and now it's my fault because this, that, and the other. And that there you might sometimes skip over something or come to a conclusion that really the facts don't bear out when they're listened to by a dispassionate observer like a counselor. So I've learned to listen to other people as they talk about what's frustrating or saddening them. And I pray to the Holy Spirit. uh, Jesus once called himself truth. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So I'll pray to him and say, Truth, would you come sit by me and show me where there's some untruth? If there's untruth in the way this person is understanding the events of their life, could you show it to me so I can point it out to them? And at least offer them the opportunity to question their own thought process. Um, People don't always like that. Sometimes they'd rather stay with their own certitude, even if it makes them sad. In which case, maybe you just wait until maybe there's a more receptive turn of events later. But anyway, uh, the idea that she had that it was her fault, that she told us that Bridget told us that she had a thought about her parents, and that now she's done a terrible thing by dying as an 11-year-old and ruining their life. Well, in this compassionate response part of this trilogy, I want to speak to any of you who might be listening and interested in this because you've lost a child. And it's just such a heartbreak. Everybody says that. You've heard that over and over again, haven't you? It's unnatural for a parent to have to bury a child. Well, yes, except that it's happened all through history, and it might have happened to you. Well, she felt bad about that, but it was done. And there was nothing to be done except keep moving and keep trying to, do something positive for herself and for others. So I hope if you've been through the heartbreak of losing a child, I have a few things to offer. One is I hope you'll let people love you and know that uh, life still does go on. I encourage people to push against that truism that you never get over it. Well, I don't have children of my own, so I haven't had children to lose, but I'm 68 years old, and I have had many people I love who have died, some of them suddenly and prematurely, if you will. So it's not as though I don't have any experience to speak from at all. I just believe it's important to keep loving. And though there might have been very specific people that we loved that we feel like now there's a hole in my heart because that person has died. Oh, yeah, all right, well then grieve, but don't grieve in a way that closes off a joyful future. Do the best you can, uh, and let people love you. But that that's my approach anyway. Is just to say I believe there are always more blessings to be had. I miss the specific blessings that were embodied in this person who has now died, but I'm not going to close myself off to life and love because this tragedy has befallen me and a person I love. I just think a certain kind of stubbornness that I'm going to love is a good idea. Um, Sometimes people email me or I end up in conversations over the phone with people who have lost, especially lost a child, either to drug abuse or suicide. Sometimes it's a combination of both, actually. And sometimes parents will feel it's their fault. If only I had done this, that, or the other thing, my child would have had a different outcome or might still be here or might be happy. That kind of guilt, I believe it's important to, with the help of a wise other, a counselor or somebody that can help you, listen to the way that you're thinking about your grief, and let somebody else check your work, kind of, and offer some possibilities of other ways of thinking. For example, um, sometimes people blame themselves for things that are simply accidental and no one's fault. The very first one of these that I did, if you recall, was Ray, the fellow that died in a fire uh, on the engine of an old car. And he was blaming God. He was taught that God, the reason that people die is because God takes them. Well, I just had to push against that with him. He was motivated to change, kind of. And I just said, well, I've known God all my life, and I just don't think that's true. I don't think God is a body snatcher. He would still have to change his mind. You can't do that for another person. But if you have been through a pain like that and you blame yourself, look for the truth. Is it really true that it's my fault? Or if I had done or not done this or that other thing, that maybe there'd been a different outcome. Very often you can't be sure of that because it's a hypothetical circumstance. And most actions have a cluster of factors or motivations that preceded them. And so to draw a direct correlation between this event and the death of my child, very often that just won't hold up. But if there is something of truth where you feel like I let them down in a way that I wished I could go back and redo, with the help of a therapist or a counselor, I think you can form a heartfelt apology that will be heard across the veil. I can no longer presume a lot of distance between me and anybody, God or any the angels, the saints, anyone. I don't know how I could possibly do that because I've just had too many experiences to show that uh, that everything is close and love binds us together. If in fact you believe that there's something that you need to get off your chest and apologize about to someone who has died, well then do it. But do it from the heart, do it well, finish the job, and then leave it alone. That's my advice. Has anybody ever apologized to you too many times? Has somebody's guilt continued to cycle in them in such a way that they not only apologize to you once, but then a dozen times after that? It's annoying. It's unhelpful. And it doesn't really help a person heal. Uh, so please don't do that to yourself. Just if you need to have somebody's help crafting an apology uh, to someone who has died, where you think that somehow or another you failed them, do it well and do it once. And then presume that that loving person is capable of forgiving you and letting it be bygones, and that there's an opportunity to start fresh. My my foundational story of my faith is the death and resurrection of Jesus. He's abandoned by everybody that loved him practically, and nobody apologized. But from the cross, he says, "Father, forgive them; they don't know what they're doing." And then when he does appear on Easter morning and in the days that followed in the stories in the gospel and the Acts of the Apostles, he doesn't get in anybody's face and said, "Where the hell were you?" The first thing he says is, "Peace be with you, peace be with you, peace be with you," because that's all he wants is for us to be at one with one another and back together if there's been some sort of separation. So I'd offer that for you. Maybe I'll end with this. If you are carrying a burden of guilt about the death of somebody, or that you feel like you've let down, in prayer, try to imagine the best of times. If you love somebody, there are best of times. There are stories of specific moments and seasons of life where you were good and at one with one another and on the same page, loving each other. Try to go back into those memories and let yourself sit in them, you know, kind of steep in them like a tea bag in the hot water. Just let it soothe you that this person and I once loved each other and trusted each other and had no trouble pass between us. Then, after you've done that, if there is trouble that later entered in that might have cascaded into a series of negative events, and if there's something that you really feel the need to apologize for, there you go. Say, I'm sorry, I wish I'd done the different thing. And then turn loose of it. It can help to breathe deeply, receive, in with the good and out with the bad, receive what I would call the grace of God or God's love. And God's love includes the opportunity to start over. Loving people don't hold their beloveds accountable to every little letter of the law that you failed me in some way. Really, part of being good at loving is being quick to forgive. You're capable of that. So is your loved one. Just say from the heart that uh, I'm sorry, and from now on, I'll try to do better. That's, my part of the charism of Catholic priests is hearing confessions. And near the end of it, there's a prayer of amendment that we say in prayer. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be unburdened about this thing that was troubling me, this past event for which I'm sorry. And with the help of your grace, I choose to amend my behavior. And that doesn't mean I presume that I will never again fall, because I probably will. But I'm going to get up and try again with your help, God. So I think I'll leave it at that. That gives me joyful hope. Hope is always for something not yet seen or attained. So it's always something future and not completely tangible, but you can imagine it and hope for a better day. And hoping for a better day can put you in a better frame of mind so that you can get up from your meditation and be useful, be of service. Because if you say sad and downtrodden all the time, you might walk right past an opportunity to help someone. You didn't even see their suffering because yours blinded you. That's not a good thing. So I keep thinking that I'm done and I keep talking. I'm going to stop here and leave it at that. Next time, the third part of this trilogy about Bridget is going to be spiritual practice. And I think I'm already drifting into that. What I was just doing with you really is more of a spiritual practice that pertains or belongs better in part 3. So I guess I've sort of given you a preview of coming attractions. My helper, Lisa Zarita, is going to be with me on that one, where we're going to record it in a few days. And so that you could look forward to that. She's just delightful. So for now, that's it. This has been Father Nathan Castle, the Joyful Friar podcast. If you want to be in touch with me, please contact me through my website, nathan-castle.com, and I'll do my best to be back in touch with you. But for now, God bless you. Remember, I'm praying for you. Bye now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.